everyone. Happy Thursday. Welcome to So What, the Marketing Analytics and Insights live show. I am joined by Chris and John. Hey, guys.
Hello.
Oh, yeah. I pulled off a high five without not being in my normal office. That's a plus.
Pre-show, we were commiserating over our shared experiences of slipping on all of the black ice in New England. So if you are also experiencing that, we feel for you. We have all now since fallen on the ice. Speaking of deconstructing our bodies, ourselves, it's a terrible transition. Just work with me, people. This week, how to deconstruct generative AI use cases. The reason this came up was because what we're seeing, and this is true for a lot of people, so we wanted to make sure people knew they were not in it alone, is there's still a lot of question about where to start with generative AI. What we're seeing, what we're hearing, and sometimes this happens to us, is here's a new tool, go make magic with it, or show your value with it, or find efficiencies, or just basically do something extra on top of everything else you're already doing with very little instruction. And so what we wanted to do this week was give you some advice and tools and tips on how to deconstruct generative AI use cases so that you can better set yourself up for success. So Chris, where would you like to start this week?
We will start with our friend, the 5P framework, because this is the best tool for deconstructing a use case. Okay, do you want to quickly review the 5Ps?
Absolutely. So the 5P framework is purpose, people, process, platform, and performance. Purpose always anchors it, always starts. What is the question you're trying to answer? What is the problem you're trying to solve? People, who's involved both internally and externally. Externally being your customers, because every action you take should, in fact, do something for your customers. Process, how are you doing the thing? Platform, what tools are you using? And performance, how do you measure success? And so the 5P framework is meant to help you organize your thoughts, your questions, your requirements, and give you the opportunity to make sure you're touching on all of the important pieces and not skipping over your process, for example, or the people involved, for example. Purpose and performance are always the bookends. Ideally, it's people, process, platform. Realistically, it's platform, process, people.
And if you'd like a copy of this, you can get it at TrustInsights.ai/5P framework. It is free. There's no forms to fill out, nothing to get, no information to give. All right. So a lot of the time, to what you were saying, Katie, people are just said, hey, here's a use case for AI. You can use it to do this. And it's kind of like watching a cooking show where, the person's like, and, here's the thing you pull out of the oven and isn't it amazing? It's beautiful. And in fact, I'm not familiar with it in depth, but isn't there like a show called Nailed It where like people attempt to make like what they see on like Pinterest and it just goes horribly wrong? I feel like it's on Netflix.
That does sound familiar. John, you're shaking your head. Are you familiar with this?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if it's Nailed It or there's another one. But it's, they show like a perfect Kermit the Frog cake, and then you'll see just like a weird green pile of stuff, and they'll be like, nailed it.
I mean, kudos to them for at least giving it a shot. But back to AI. So actually, a couple of weeks ago, my good friend Sunny Hunt was at a event, and she was giving me some voice of customer feedback. And the specific feedback that she had heard, an anecdote was, our company just invested in Copilot, and the executive team wants us to start using it and, demonstrating the ROI. That whole statement and feedback is really vague, because what ROI of what? Efficiencies of what? And also, for people who aren't familiar, like, what is Copilot? What does it do? Like, am I supposed to, write all my emails with it? Am I supposed to write all my documents with it? Like, there was so little instruction, but that's the challenge, is these tools are just that. They're just tools. They don't come with a user manual. You, the user, have to figure it out.
Exactly. So go ahead, John.
I was just saying, that's totally the pointy-haired bosses coming in, just like, get me some of that AI. We need some AI this quarter.
Uh-huh.
Exactly. So let's pick a use case that we can take apart and turn it into something, because one of the things that I love about use cases when they're done well is they are the seed from which other things can grow, such as a requirements document or a product document or a work plan or a standard operating procedure. If you've got the use case that's well documented, then you can turn it into other things. And 40-year-old me from 10 years ago would be appalled at the words coming out of my mouth right now. But it turns out that generative AI, because language models need language to work well, works really well with things like requirements documents, whereas being vague or confusing does not do well with them. Even the smartest models are like, I don't know what you're talking about. And so if we do these things well, it dramatically cuts back on the time. I'll give you an example. I'm working on a project for a client, and it took me 90 minutes to write out the requirements for the plan, and then I gave that to generative AI. It was a conversation going back and forth saying, oh, we want to do this, we want to do this, what about this, what did I forget, and so on and so forth. And I ended up with a really long requirements document. I then said, turn it into a work plan, step by step, a numbered work plan. And then I put it into the generative AI tool and said, okay, now execute the writing of the code for step 1, step 2, step 3. And in less than 15 minutes, I had working code, first try, no errors, because I went through the hard work of the requirements planning up front. So let's pick a use case.
I was expecting a huge hurrah from Katie on that.
I apologies again, because this is live and things happen on the live show. My dog has finally decided that I exist again, and so my mic was muted because she's yelling at me. Because that's how things work.
We love it.
But it's so funny because I remember when I was a project manager and the fights that I used to have, it's the uphill battle and the resistance of getting the requirements documented took so much time, and there was so difficult. Excuse me.
That's okay.
It was so difficult. Sorry, there's birds outside the window. Here we are. It was so difficult to get the team to recognize the importance of having fully baked requirements. And every single time without fail, it bit them in the ass because they would develop this thing. Then they would hand it off to QA, and QA would say, what am I supposed to test? And then they would give it to the stakeholder, and the stakeholder would be like, this isn't what I asked for. And I, as the project manager, was the one who was in the middle of it, in the line of fire, saying, I really tried to get these requirements done. And they're like, I don't want your excuses. I just need you to get it done. And it was this such frustrating, soul killing process of trying to get anything written down. To be fair, it was not just the developers. The stakeholders were really crappy at giving me their requirements. Oh, they can just figure it out. Oh, it can just happen. And all around, I've never been someplace where requirements has been something that people are like, yeah, we should really do our requirements. That's going to save us a bunch of time. So I'm really excited to hear about your experience, Chris, because when I started working with you, as we noted this morning, a decade ago, that was definitely not on your roadmap or radar. You were like, I'm not writing things down. I'm just doing. Forget documentation. I'm just moving forward. I'm just doing things. And so this is a whole new Christopher S. Penn.
It is. So let's tackle a use case, a very common use case, which is vendor selection. We're a B2B marketing firm. We're always looking to figure out who should we be using? What should we be using for CRM and marketing automation and things like that? And I think if we could show how generative AI could be used to accelerate that process, that arduous, painful process, we might learn a thing or two, and we might have some tips for how we market ourselves. So we're going to start. I'm going to bring up here my AI tool of choice. Now, I'm using Google AI Studio and Google Gemini. You can use ChatGPT. You can use Anthropic Claude. You can use whatever you want. It does not matter as long as it's a modern model. So we're going to start with a skeleton prompt. And the skeleton prompt I'm going to put in goes like this. You are a world-class management consultant style of McKinsey, Bain, and BCG. We're going to create a use case documentation for set of provided information. The use case documentation is going to follow the Trust Insights 5P framework. explain the 5 Ps and the format. So we're going to start with that skeleton. And now I'm going to say the use case is using generative AI tools, in particular perplexity.ai deep research, to select a vendor for a B2B company's marketing, automation, and CRM. Start asking me questions. And so this is taking that use case, which is pretty clear, which is what we want to do, and say, well, okay, let's dig into this more. So what are the primary pain points and challenges? What are the overarching business goals? Why is Perplexity being used as this choice? So we're going to start by saying well, in this case, I'm going to put in a knowledge block. I'm going to put in a couple of knowledge blocks because we want the tool to understand us overall. Here's some background information about us, our ideal customer, and how we currently market. And let's go ahead and put in our company profile, and we're going to put in our current marketing. And I'm going to put in our ideal customer profile. Now, go ahead, Katie.
I was going to say, what I really like about this, and this again was sort of my pain point as a project manager, one of my jobs was to ask questions. Unfortunately, nobody liked to see me coming, ever. And what you're doing here is the system is asking the questions on behalf of the project manager, for lack of a better term. And you're not getting frustrated by it, like, oh, let me give the machine more information to make better requirements. And it's really just fascinating to me that this kind of process can help people like me, the business analysts, the project managers, the operational people, get the information without being in the line of fire of, to be completely honest, like, a lot of times our roles is seen as like naggy and annoying because we're asking a million questions. But if we can automate it and give it to someone to like answer the machine, that takes us out of it and we can still just get our jobs done. So there's like, I love this. I love seeing that this is the way that it could work. And I'm not personally offended. Answer me, answer the machine. I don't care. I just need the answers to the questions.
Mm-hmm. Now, John, I'm going to ask you, in terms of CRM, what are the things that you care about? What are the must-haves that you want as our business developer?
Yeah, classic ones on the CRM front is deal management, lead management. Integration with email is a nice to have if that works well. Integration with the website to be able to track leads and score leads. Those are the huge ones.
What things piss you off about our current implementation?
Oh, that's a good one. Full reporting suite. We have a bunch of handcuffs turned on that. Robust API with unlimited calls. What else pisses me off? But I do have to say, HubSpot is actually a pretty low piss off threshold. That are not doing too bad. But let me think if there's anything else.
I think the connection between the databases. So like contacts and companies are separate.
Yeah, I'm okay. Like HubSpot does that pretty well because and so that's something that should be on the hierarchy side. It should have one-to-many for table connections as far as contacts and company and organizations and deals. Yeah, because if that stuff is one-to-one, that's a horrible mess. Yeah, I don't know what else. Anything else?
Well, I would say I agree with the things about the APIs. I would say that we care about robust, clear reporting, proactive notifications, integration with platforms like Google Analytics, Google Looker Studio, BigQuery, dedicated Python libraries. I think those are all things that you would want in a good CRM. And then our timeline is this year, and it is currently February 2025. Budget. What do you want to pay, Katie?
Nothing.
I know. Well, it'd be better if they paid us. That would be.
Yeah, I mean, that would be amazing. No, so when I think about what we spend on this kind of service now, I don't want to have to spend more than I'm spending. So I would say less than $300 a month for, call it 5 users. Right now we have 4 users. I would like the option of adding a 5th.
Okay, so $60 a month per user.
Yeah. Because right now that's for us what we have budgeted, so I can at least absorb that kind of cost.
Okay, so CEO, business development staff, data science team. Okay, what other questions do you need answered to build out this use case as we discussed? So let's see what it comes up with now. We've given it a bunch of new answers. Okay. Further clarification, initial vendor list, feature prioritization, vendor evaluation, security compliance, evaluation process. For the purposes of the live stream, I'm just going to say, let's just go ahead and build it, but you would want to spend this time, doing this part. In the interests of time, let's go ahead and build the 5P framework use case following the template using the information I've provided. So it's going to go through and take a look at that template, and it's a possibility it may completely screw this up. So if it does, no, actually it's looking pretty good. So let's take this and examine it. Make it a little bit bigger here. So 1, 2. Our use case for generative AI using Perplexity's deep research to efficiently and effectively identify and select a marketing automation CRM, performance, feature alignment, budget adherence, time and compliance, stakeholder agreement, people, the stakeholders, the audiences, the Trust Insights team, the platform. This is the platforms we're going to use for this use case. Build the detailed requirements, use Perplexity, and then the directions. So from here, I'd say, great. Using all the information I've provided, build a very detailed, rich, robust prompt for Perplexity deep research. I will provide the Trust Insights ICP, about us, and marketing activities as a single document. I need you to write the rest of the prompt. So we're going to direct it based on this. Now that we have the use case written out like a recipe, we can have this start building out a plan. Now, if I was going to build this as software, I might say now build a PRD, a product requirements document. If I was building this out as a service of some kind, I might say build this out as a business requirements document. So here is the prompt for Perplexity. Let's go over to our friends at Perplexity. And I'm going to choose deep research, which is their research utility. I'm going to put in that prompt, and then let me, in a separate window, copy in the ICP, and the 2 knowledge blocks so that Perplexity has it.
And so while you're doing that, the other scenario is, so rather than going straight to, Perplexity, what you built in the previous software in Google Studio gives you an opportunity to take those 5 Ps and have a conversation. So bring it back to your stakeholder, bring it back to your team. This is everything I've collected from you. This is how we've put it together. Is this correct? What are we missing? And so it takes you out of the conversation in some ways, because it's all of their information really just summarized into the 5 Ps. And it's like, did we get all the right people? Is this the process that we understand it to be, that we want it to be? Are these the platforms that we would want to use? Is this the right measure of success? What we know about humans a lot of times is it's easier to react to something than it is to give net new information. And so if you put this together and then, let's say I brought it to John, I'm like, John, we're trying to select a new CRM. Is all of this correct? He could then read it through and be like, actually, it's missing these 5 things, or this is great. I hadn't thought of, the following, piece of information. But it gives us the opportunity to get on the same page about the use case. And that's a big part of the process of selecting use cases for generative AI, is making sure everybody's in agreement of what it is we're doing. Why is research spelled incorrectly?
Because I keyed that wrong.
Oh, okay. It wasn't like AI is going off the rails and just,
no,
doing whatever.
I'm showing the essentially the prompt, the output of just from Gemini, so we can look at what the use case looks like. Because ideally, this use case would be something that you would catalog and store somewhere in your company's knowledge management system to say, okay, our use case for generative AI for researching vendors looks like this. And then you could say, here's the ingredients, here's the tools, here's the directions. Just from the directions alone, you have the ability to turn it into a standard operating procedure.
Which is also fantastic. And that's when we talk about business requirements and documentation, that's a big part of it. How do you do something, the same time more than once? So a lot of it comes down to documentation. So I'll get down off of that ivory tower for now. I could probably rant about documentation forever.
So we put that prompt in along with that huge knowledge block, and now Perplexity is going through. It has so far identified 47 sources. It is now going through and doing the deep research, reading each source, assembling its ideas about who it should be doing, and then it's going to come out with the list of sources, and then the summary of key findings. Based on TrustInsights' operational requirements, technical needs, and budget constraints, 3 platforms emerge as top candidates: Zoho CRM Plus, HubSpot CRM Suite, and Freshworks CRM. And so here's the platform methodology, the recommended platforms. Zoho CRM Plus meets 100% of must-have requirements. Its various strengths. HubSpot meets 90%, has limited relational depth. Freshsales meets 85%. And it is continuing to spit out all of its. So here's the features that we asked about in our requirements, in our use case, and it scores each CRM on them. It shows you implementations for the API. And so this is a very, very, very thorough, this is the deep research product, a very thorough analysis of which CRM we should buy.
What do you think, John?
I'm psyched that HubSpot comes in strong. I mean, I hate to be a jerk, but the common denominator among Zoho customers is that they don't have any budget. That's really, why it makes the list. So yeah, it's good to see HubSpot in there. And then the fresh one, have not seen that one before. I'm also surprised that it didn't still throw Salesforce in, but I think that is the right choice because the price point is so huge now. They've blown themselves out of the market, and it really is overkill for what we're doing here. So yeah, this is definitely right on the mark. This would be the short list that I'd select if I had to do that in my head right now. And as expected, it's come up with a third vendor that's a possibility that is somebody that I've never heard of.
Mm-hmm.
So Chris, can you scroll back to the scoring for a second? So what I like about this is, we can see very quickly at a glance, and this is something that can be, copied and pulled out to be used in communication. But if we said, for example, like, well, Zoho's not the right tool, we already know that for whatever reason, we can then prioritize what's the most important. And perhaps that's something we should have done during requirements gathering of, we've listed out a bunch of things, but if we had to rank them in order of the most important to least important, this would help us make the decision faster. So if I'm looking, it looks like budget compliance, 10 out of 10 for HubSpot, versus, reporting, that's higher in Zoho, lower in HubSpot. But is that as important as the budget or, the API, for example. And those are the kinds of things that I would imagine as you start to get closer to a decision are going to be the deciding factors.
Exactly. The advantage of doing this use case development, deconstructing the use case, turning into a full use case document, is also for tools like Perplexity. If you're not on the paid plan, you have a limited number, 5 per day, of deep research queries that you can run. So if you're going back and forth asking questions inside of Perplexity, you're going to burn through those credits really, really fast. If you take the time in a tool like Gemini or any reasoning model to think through and ask questions and build the use case thoroughly and then have it build the prompt, you will conserve those very precious few credits you get per day, and get it right the first time out of the box.
That's a really solid point. We've talked in previous episodes about the compute time and what that means. So if you want more information on that, you can go to TrustInsights.ai/YouTube and find our So What playlist and find all of the other past episodes where we talk about the systems themselves and what those tokens and compute costs and all that good stuff actually means.
Mm-hmm. So this is an example of the deconstruction of a use case. To say, I've got this thing, like use generative AI to do vendor selection. That is the use case. This is what it looks like deconstructed when you take it apart and you turn it into a recipe that you can then turn into a work plan that you can then take action on. And to what you were saying, Katie, earlier about someone like Sunny saying, hearing people say, where do I start? That's where you start. You go on LinkedIn, you see somebody showing off, hey, check out these awesome generative AI use cases. Like, okay, I'm going to take that one. I'm going to put it into this prompt framework. I'm going to say, help me deconstruct this. Help me work out the 5 Ps of, would I even use this use case or not? Like, give you an example. Today, LM Studio released a new version that has speculative decoding. And it's amazing. It's awesome. And everyone who's not a techie is like, so what? What is the use case for that? Well, the use case is it speeds things up remarkably when you're doing local AI. That still doesn't tell you, how do I get started with this? What do I do with it? Like, it sounds cool. What do we do with it?
A lot of users default to, so if I opened up ChatGPT for the first time, you can ask the question, what can you do? And so it'll give you a long list of things that it can do, but that doesn't necessarily resonate with you as an individual and your job. And so, Chris, to, follow this line of reasoning, using the 5 Ps, you can at least structure your question and the information that you have into, purpose. I need to figure out how to use generative AI in my day-to-day job. My day-to-day job is X. That's your knowledge block. People. Well, I'm the person. Here are my direct reports. Here are my customers. Process. Here are the things we do. Platform. Here are the tools that we use, and performance. My measure of success is, ROI on our, work product, or more efficiency with reporting, and gathering all of your information that way and then giving that to generative AI. It's very meta, but you can do that. It would say, oh, here's where you could potentially use a tool like me to help you, meet your goals.
Exactly. Let's run through one more example. This will be a much less technical example, but we're going to use the exact same use case decomposition framework prompt. And by the way, we'll put a copy of this prompt in Analytics for Marketers. So if you're not a member of the Analytics for Marketers Slack group, go to TrustInsights.ai/Analytics for Marketers, and you'll be able to get it after the show. Today's use case is evaluating an NDA for bilateral fairness for both parties. I need a generative AI tool to read the NDA and tell me whether or not I should sign it. Ask me questions about this use case. So let's see what it comes up with for this relatively straightforward use case, and yet it's a super valuable one. So what is the context of this NDA? Is it a potential business partnership? What are your concerns? So the context is an NDA with a consulting firm to hire them to do work for us. Our major concerns are unfairness, things that protect them but not us. Our current approach is to just sign it and hope.
This is fiction.
Exactly. Yes. Give me some examples of unfairness. Unfairness would be requiring strict confidentiality on our part, but no confidentiality requirement on their part, or denying us the ability to change the jurisdiction of arbitration. The desired outcome is a scorecard, clause by clause, of the NDA and its fairness to both parties. A 10 is fair to both. A 1 is deeply unfair to one side. It should also specify who's getting hosed. The NDA is a PDF. We need to evaluate it right now. Okay, so we have ourselves a lovely use case documented now. We have the purpose, evaluate an NDA from a consulting firm, move beyond sign and hope. Success is measured by the generation of a clause-by-clause scorecard from a generative AI tool. The people, you, the stakeholder, the audience, the platform, the generative AI tool, the process, one PDF, access to a tool, threshold for unfairness, tools, directions. Great. From this use case, build me a thorough prompt for a generative AI LLM to evaluate the NDA. So in this case, we are, as before, essentially generating code. It's just a code in plain language. And then I'm going to go to, let's see, do I have an NDA that I can use? That's always the question. Let's see. In PDFs, we have, I have a bunch of NDAs. I can't use any of them on the air. Wait, I can use ours. I'll use ours because that one is safe to use. Yes, here we go. Let's put this into, let's copy our prompt, start a new prompt, and take our lovely NDA, export it as a PDF. And now we can drop it in and see whether our NDA is fair to us or not.
I don't know why I'm nervous about this exercise.
Let's see, clause by clause. Preamble is NA, project defined, fairness, confidential information is a 9, exclude information is a 10, general obligations is 10, development similar is a 9, fairness. This is looking for non-solicitation is a 7, it's a 2 years non-solicitation period, it's 10. In general, our NDA, this is a 6, governing law. Oh yeah, that's the arbitration. In general, ours is a very nicely balanced NDA. It doesn't unfairly disadvantage one party or the other.
Well, you can't
John?
lose because it's either fair or it's optimized to be the best possible agreement for us.
So John is the one who does the majority of reading of, the legal contracts, MSAs, NDAs, partner agreements, that kind of stuff. Is this a process that you would use for doing some vetting of that documentation? Do you think that would help you and save you some time?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like everything else, right? The thing would be the testing of it, run through it 3 or 4 times. And if after 3 or 4 times it hasn't done anything really fruity, or even it's even enough to know that, well, it will take care of these, 80% of these things. And I just need to look for one or two things to make sure that, there's nothing really bizarre in there. Like indemnification gets really weird if that's in there, but a lot of times that's not part of an NDA. So, but yeah, no, I am all for all of this because there's better things to do than combing through a legal document that, I mean, we have to be honest, right? It's 90% plus chance this is just going to sit in some file folder forever and never get looked at. I mean, it needs to get done to close a deal, but it's not the best
Fingers
use of
crossed.
our time. Yeah.
Well,
Right.
and and that's one of those, to your point about testing, when you looking at like an NDA, for example, they are written in like all of these legal documents are written in such a way that really don't make sense to, a casual person, someone who isn't as familiar with all the legalese. I have to look up indemnification every single time, regardless of the fact that I read through all of the contracts. I've helped put together the contracts, but it's one of those terms that just does not stick in my head. And the amount of time I spend relearning what indemnification is versus is it fair or not, using a system like this, it's, I could be saving so much more time than trying to reorient myself every time to a contract.
Exactly.
Those
I had
are-
to turn on the warning banner.
Yeah, right.
Yes, we see.
But yeah, those are hours of your life you never get back. And nobody is on their deathbed like, oh, those NDAs I did were so great. I'm so glad I spent my life doing that.
Well, I imagine if you were a lawyer getting paid $450 an hour, you're like, yes, give me more NDAs. to
There
review."
are people, yes, there absolutely are. They are not with us.
Well, sure, but we're talking about people who are like us, who are not lawyers, who perhaps like small businesses or teams that are trying to get contracts passed through without needing to, bring in their whole legal team. Can we at least get a baseline of, is this a good contract or not? That's really what we're talking about. I think even in the feedback, Chris, from Generative AI, I saw there was a call out like involve your legal team. It was like, oh, okay, yeah, I should probably do that if I'm talking about legal documentation for my company.
Exactly. So to recap, for deconstructing AI use case, first you have to just know what the use case is. Like, can you articulate it? I want to use generative AI to do this. Even though we always say to people, don't lead with the technology, we acknowledge people are going to lead with the technology. So the step one is to know what the use case is. Step two is to feed it into the 5P framework and say, we're going to build a use case deconstructed purpose, people, process, platform, performance, and then answer all of the questions that generative AI is going to ask us about, like, well, who else is involved? Well, what else are you doing? What tools are you currently using? And so on and so forth. Once it spits out the fully documented use case, we then can do things like generate a prompt from this use case, which, by the way, I don't know if you noticed, the prompts that this process generates are like a page and a half long. They are not evaluate this NDA for fairness, right? We saw just the output from the use case because it considered all the things that went into it, and we answered all those questions, came up with a robust prompt that will give you much better results. Then you can build a work plan, you can build a requirements document, and have generative AI do the thing. But if you follow this process, you will get really great results out of generative AI.
I really like pairing the 5P framework with these, deconstructing the use cases and then having the system ask you the questions. Like, these are the questions I need to answer. Now ask me about them. And it's a really helpful way to put all the information together. I'm a really big fan of this.
Yep. So when the next time a stakeholder comes to you and says, hey, we need some ROI on this AI stuff, you can say, great, let's build out the use case. Let's build out the performance. Is ROI a performance measure? If so, in the process of using the 5P framework, you would say one of our stakeholder requirements is some way to demonstrate ROI. So we need to incorporate that in here. Now, in the case of something like the NDA evaluator, the ROI is pretty simple. You'll probably cut your legal time in half because you have very specific questions for your legal counsel, as opposed to just read through this whole thing. And your own time. So John no longer has to spend 4 hours reading, a 22-page NDA just to decide whether or not we should sign it. In the example of using deep research to evaluate a shortlist for vendors, right? The ROI there is not spending 3 days on that. Instead, having the shortlist built for you. If you did the 5 Ps, if you did the use case, if you had it generate the prompt so that you got the best results the first time out.
John, final thoughts?
We are not lawyers. We are not investors. We are not regulated software reviewers. But this was all useful stuff that you definitely need to do.
And again, if you want a copy of the use case prompt that we used to generate, you will find that in the Analytics for Marketers Slack group. We look forward to seeing you there. It's free to join, no obligations, and you get to chat with 4,000 other marketers who ask and answer you those questions every single day. That's going to do it for this week's show. We will talk to you all on the next one. Thanks for watching today. Be sure to subscribe to our show wherever you're watching it. For more resources and to learn more, check out the Trust Insights podcast at TrustInsights.ai/TI podcast and our weekly email newsletter at TrustInsights.ai/newsletter. Got questions about what you saw in today's episode? Join our free Analytics for Marketers Slack group at TrustInsights.ai/analytics for marketers. See you next time.